Welcome to this quiet hour, a space carved out from the rush and noise of the waking world, where nothing is asked of you except perhaps to rest, to let your body settle into whatever surface holds you now, and to allow your mind to wander gently through ideas that ask nothing in return, ideas that simply exist in the soft darkness like stars you might notice without needing to name them or remember where they are. Tonight, we're going to explore something so ordinary, so constant, that it lives in the background of every moment you've ever experienced. Something that begins before you're born and continues without pause until the very end. Something that right now, as you listen to these words, is happening inside you whether you notice it or not. We're going to think about breathing, but not in the way you might have encountered it before, not as an exercise or a technique or something to master, but rather as a quiet biological conversation that's been unfolding inside you since your first moment. A conversation between your body and your brain, between the air and your blood, between the ancient parts of your nervous system and the world outside your skin. Breathing is perhaps the most automatic thing you do, so automatic that you can go hours, even days, without thinking about it consciously, and yet it's also something you can take control of at any moment. Something you can speed up or slow down, something you can shape with intention if you choose to. This strange dual nature, this existence at the border between the voluntary and the involuntary, makes breathing unlike almost anything else in your biology, a bridge between the parts of you that think and decide and the parts of you that simply operate, keeping you alive without asking permission. And hidden in this bridge, woven into the rhythm of your inhales and exhales, is a powerful influence over something that might seem completely separate from the simple act of pulling air into your lungs. Hidden in your breathing is a gentle but profound control over how calm or anxious you feel, how clearly you can think, how deeply you can rest. The way you breathe, moment by moment, is quietly shaping your inner weather, tuning the volume of your stress response up or down, telling your brain whether the world is safe or whether it should prepare for danger. This connection between breath and brain, between the rhythm of air moving in and out of your body and the electrical patterns flowing through your nervous system, isn't mystical or metaphorical. It's wired into your biology at the deepest levels, built into circuits that formed millions of years before the first humans walked, refined across countless generations of mammals and reptiles and even simpler creatures, all of whom face the same fundamental challenge: how to know when to rest and when to run, when to digest food and heal wounds, and when to fight or flee. Your breathing rate, the speed and depth of each breath, is one of the most important signals your brain uses to answer this ancient question. And when you slow your breathing down, when you stretch each inhale and especially each exhale across more seconds than usual, you're sending a very specific message through the intricate networks that connect your lungs to your heart to your brain, a message that says, in the only language your nervous system truly understands, that right now, in this moment, there is no emergency, no threat, no reason to remain vigilant and tense. But before we can fully appreciate how this works, before we can understand why, something as simple as breathing slowly has such a profound effect on your mental state, we need to begin at the beginning, or at least at one of the beginnings, and think about what breathing actually is at the most basic level. When you inhale, you're not simply filling an empty space in your chest. You're initiating a cascade of events that involves dozens of muscles, miles of airways, millions of tiny air sacs, and a gas exchange so efficient and so essential that stopping it for even a few minutes would mean the end of consciousness and, soon after, the end of everything. The air you pull in, this mixture of nitrogen and oxygen and traces of other gases, travels through your nose or mouth, down through your throat, through the branching passages of your bronchial tree, finally arriving at the alveoli, those delicate grape-like clusters deep in your lungs where the barrier between air and blood is so thin, just a single cell thick in places, that molecules can slip across it almost effortlessly. Oxygen, that element so crucial to the way your cells generate energy, crosses from the air into your bloodstream, where it binds to hemoglobin in your red blood cells, turning them a brighter shade of red as they become loaded with this essential cargo. Meanwhile, carbon dioxide, the waste product of your cell's constant work, makes the opposite journey, moving from your blood into the air spaces of your lungs, ready to be expelled with your next exhale. This exchange, this trade of oxygen for carbon dioxide, is happening right now in your body, in hundreds of millions of alveoli simultaneously. A vast, quiet transaction that's repeated about 20,000 times each day, more than 7 million times each year, hundreds of millions of times across an average human lifetime, almost always without you noticing it at all. But this gas exchange, crucial as it is only part of what makes breathing so important. The other part, the part that connects your breath to your emotional state, to your anxiety or calm, to your ability to fall asleep or stay alert, has to do with what your brain is monitoring, what signals it's constantly checking to determine what your breath is telling it about the state of the world. Your brain, specifically the ancient regions deep in your brainstem and the slightly more modern structures of your limbic system, is constantly receiving information about how you're breathing. It knows how fast you're breathing, how deeply, what the balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide is in your blood, and it uses this information, combines it with thousands of other signals, to set what we might call your baseline level of arousal, your nervous system's general state of alertness or relaxation. This isn't a conscious process, not something you decide or think about, but rather something that happens automatically in regions of your brain that evolved long before conscious thought. Regions that are essentially asking, moment by moment, a simple question: is everything okay? Should we be calm or should we be ready for action? And one of the most powerful inputs to this ancient decision-making system is the pattern of your breathing. Because breathing is intimately connected to survival, and the way you breathe when you're safe and relaxed is fundamentally different from the way you breathe when you're in danger. Think about what happens to your breath when you're startled or afraid. It quickens, becomes shallow, moves into your upper chest rather than deep in your belly. This isn't random. This is your body preparing for action, for the possibility that you might need to run or fight, activities that require quick bursts of oxygen and rapid removal of carbon dioxide. The fast, shallow breathing of fear or stress is efficient for short-term physical activity, but it's also a signal, a message that your brainstem and your limbic system read as confirmation that something threatening might be happening, which in turn reinforces the state of alertness and anxiety, creating what can become a self-reinforcing cycle. On the other hand, when you're deeply relaxed, when you're resting or sleeping or simply feeling safe and calm, your breathing naturally slows down, deepens, becomes more regular. Your belly rises and falls with each breath. Your exhales grow longer, sometimes much longer than your inhales. And this pattern, this slow, deep, regular breathing, is also a signal, but one that tells your brain something entirely different. When your breathing slows, when you extend your exhales, you're activating a specific branch of your nervous system, a part of what's called your autonomic nervous system, which controls all the functions that happen without your conscious direction. The autonomic nervous system has two main divisions that work in a kind of gentle opposition, balancing each other like two sides of a scale. One side, the sympathetic nervous system, is responsible for arousal and action, for the fight or flight response that prepares your body to deal with threats. It increases your heart rate, diverts blood to your muscles, sharpens your attention, releases stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. The other side, the parasympathetic nervous system, does nearly the opposite. It slows your heart rate, promotes digestion, encourages rest and repair, and generally creates the conditions for what we call the relaxation response. These two systems are always active to some degree, always in conversation with each other, and the balance between them at any given moment determines much about how you feel, how alert or drowsy you are, how anxious or calm. And here's where breathing becomes so interesting, so powerful, because your breathing pattern is one of the few aspects of your autonomic nervous system that you can consciously control, one of the few ways you can directly influence that balance between arousal and relaxation. When you breathe quickly and shallowly, you tend to tip the balance towards sympathetic activation, toward that state of alertness and readiness. But when you breathe slowly and deeply, especially when you make your exhales longer than your inhales, you shift the balance in the other direction, toward parasympathetic activation, toward rest and calm. This shift happens through several mechanisms, several different pathways that all converge on the same result, and understanding these pathways, even just in a general way, can help make sense of why something so simple can be so effective. One of the most important mechanisms involves a nerve, a single nerve that wanders through your body like a biological highway, connecting your brain to your heart, your lungs, your digestive system, and many other organs. This nerve is called the vagus nerve, from the Latin word for wandering, and it's the main channel through which your parasympathetic nervous system communicates with the rest of your body. The vagus nerve is actually a pair of nerves, one on each side, but they function as a unit, and about 80% of the fibers in these nerves carry information from your body up to your brain, while the remaining 20% carry commands from your brain down to your organs. This means the vagus nerve is primarily a sensing system, constantly informing your brain about what's happening in your body, including what's happening with your breathing and your heart. The vagus nerve has sensors that detect when your lungs expand and contract, when your diaphragm moves up and down, and when air flows through your airways. It also monitors your heart rate, and here's where something fascinating happens, something that creates a direct link between your breath and your emotional state. Your heart doesn't beat at a perfectly steady pace. Instead, it speeds up slightly when you inhale and slows down slightly when you exhale. This variation in heart rate, this gentle speeding and slowing with each breath, is called respiratory sinus arrhythmia, and it's actually a sign of a healthy, well-regulated nervous system. The pattern exists because when you inhale, the expansion of your lungs sends signals through the vagus nerve to your brainstem, and in response, your brain temporarily reduces vagal activity to your heart, allowing it to speed up slightly. When you exhale, especially when you exhale slowly and fully, the opposite happens. Vagal activity to your heart increases, causing your heart rate to slow down. This is why your exhale is so important, why extending your exhale is one of the most effective ways to activate your parasympathetic nervous system and promote relaxation. A long, slow exhale sends a strong signal through the vagus nerve, a signal that essentially tells your brain that it can afford to reduce vigilance, to shift away from the sympathetic state of preparation and toward the parasympathetic state of rest. This isn't just a theory or an idea, it's something you can measure. Researchers have hooked people up to heart rate monitors and brain scanners and found that when people extend their exhales, when they breathe out slowly and completely, their heart rate variability increases, meaning the difference between their heart rate during inhale and exhale becomes more pronounced, and this increased variability is associated with greater vagal tone, which is essentially a measure of how active and healthy your parasympathetic nervous system is. Higher vagal tone is connected to all sorts of positive outcomes, to better emotional regulation, to resilience in the face of stress, to improved sleep quality, to lower levels of inflammation throughout the body. People with higher vagal tone tend to recover more quickly from stressful events, tend to feel calmer in general, tend to have better control over their attention and their emotions. And one of the simplest, most direct ways to improve your vagal tone, to strengthen this rest and digest branch of your nervous system, is to practice breathing slowly. To regularly spend time breathing in a way that emphasizes long, complete exhales. This doesn't require any special equipment or training. It's not complicated. It's just the simple act of breathing out slowly, of letting each exhale stretch across 4 or 5 or 6 seconds, of allowing your body to empty itself of air gradually and completely before beginning the next gentle inhale. But the vagus nerve isn't the only pathway through which slow breathing affects your brain. There's also the matter of carbon dioxide, that gas we usually think of as nothing more than a waste product, something to be expelled and forgotten. Carbon dioxide, though, is far more interesting than this simple description suggests. The level of carbon dioxide in your blood, and particularly in your brain, has a direct effect on your mental state. And when you breathe too quickly, when you hyperventilate even slightly, you expel too much carbon dioxide. And this can actually make you feel more anxious, more panicked, more on edge. This might seem counterintuitive. We tend to think of oxygen as good and carbon dioxide as bad, but the reality is more nuanced. Your body needs a certain level of carbon dioxide to function properly, and when that level drops too low, it causes changes in your blood chemistry, specifically making your blood more alkaline, which in turn affects how efficiently oxygen is released from your red blood cells to your tissues. This is part of something called the Bohr effect, a principle of chemistry and physiology that describes how the acidity of your blood influences the bond between oxygen and hemoglobin. When your blood is more acidic, which happens when carbon dioxide levels are higher, oxygen is released more readily from hemoglobin, making it more available to your cells. When your blood becomes more alkaline, which happens when you breathe too quickly and blow off too much carbon dioxide, oxygen binds more tightly to hemoglobin and is released less readily, which means your cells, including your brain cells, may actually receive less oxygen, even though your blood is carrying plenty of it. This can contribute to feelings of lightheadedness, to a sense of anxiety or panic, to difficulty concentrating. It's one reason why people sometimes feel worse when they're hyperventilating during a panic attack, even though they're breathing very quickly and taking in lots of air. They're actually disrupting the delicate balance of gases in their blood, making it harder for oxygen to reach their brain, which can intensify the feeling that something is wrong. When you breathe slowly, you avoid this problem. You maintain healthy levels of carbon dioxide, which keeps your blood chemistry in the right range, which allows oxygen to be released efficiently, which keeps your brain well supplied with what it needs to function calmly and clearly. But there's another effect of carbon dioxide that's perhaps even more important for understanding how breathing affects your emotional state. Carbon dioxide itself, at the levels normally found in your blood, has a mild sedative effect on your nervous system. It doesn't make you unconscious, of course, but it does have a subtle calming influence, a gentle dampening of neural excitability. When carbon dioxide levels are too low, this calming influence is reduced, and your neurons become more excitable, more likely to fire, more likely to generate patterns of activity that feel like anxiety or stress. When you breathe slowly and maintain healthy carbon dioxide levels, you preserve this natural calming effect, this built-in buffer against excessive neural excitability. There's also the matter of attention, of where your mind is focused when you're breathing slowly. The act of paying attention to your breath, of noticing the sensation of air moving in and out, of feeling your chest or belly rise and fall, is itself a form of meditation, a way of anchoring your attention in the present moment, rather than letting it wander through worries about the future or regrets about the past. This attentional shift isn't separate from the physiological effects we've been discussing. It's part of the same overall pattern, part of how slow breathing creates a state of calm. When you focus on your breath, you're engaging parts of your brain involved in what's called interoception, the sense of what's happening inside your body. And you're temporarily reducing activity in the parts of your brain involved in abstract thought, in planning and worrying and ruminating. This creates a kind of mental quiet, a reduction in the constant chatter that often fills your mind, and this quiet is itself relaxing, itself a form of rest. The brain regions involved in this process include the insula, which processes interoceptive signals, and the anterior cingulate cortex, which plays a role in attention and emotional regulation, and the prefrontal cortex, which is involved in executive function and conscious control. When you breathe slowly and pay attention to your breathing, you're creating a pattern of activity in these regions that's associated with what neuroscientists sometimes call the task-positive network, a set of brain areas that activate when you're focused on a specific task or sensation. At the same time, you're reducing activity in what's called the default mode network, a different set of brain areas that become active when your mind is wandering, when you're thinking about yourself, when you're lost in thought rather than focused on the present. The default mode network isn't bad. It's important for many kinds of thinking, for creativity and planning and self-reflection. But when it's overactive, when you can't stop ruminating or worrying, it can contribute to anxiety and depression and difficulty sleeping. Slow breathing, then, does something very specific to the balance of activity in your brain. It shifts you away from rumination and toward present moment awareness. It activates your parasympathetic nervous system through the vagus nerve. It maintains healthy levels of carbon dioxide that support calm neural function. And it does all of this without requiring any special skill or years of practice. You don't need to be good at meditation or have any particular talent. You just need to breathe slowly, to let each breath take longer than it might naturally take if you weren't paying attention, to make your exhales especially long and complete. This is something you can do lying in bed with the lights off, something you can do on a bus or in a waiting room, something you can do whenever you notice that your mind is racing or your body is tense or sleep feels impossibly far away. The research on slow breathing, on what scientists and clinicians sometimes call paced breathing or controlled breathing, has accumulated steadily over the past few decades, and the results have been remarkably consistent. Studies have found that regular practice of slow breathing reduces symptoms of anxiety and depression, lowers blood pressure, improves heart rate variability, enhances athletic recovery, reduces chronic pain, and most relevant for our purposes tonight, improves sleep quality and makes it easier to fall asleep. The effects aren't small, subtle. They're measurable, significant, sometimes dramatic. People who practice slow breathing regularly report feeling calmer, more centered, more able to handle stress without becoming overwhelmed. They describe better sleep, fewer nighttime awakenings, a greater sense of feeling rested in the morning. And the beauty of it is that these benefits don't require you to spend hours practicing each day. Even short sessions, 5 or 10 minutes of slow breathing, can produce noticeable effects, and the more regularly you practice, the more these effects seem to build and strengthen over time. One of the interesting questions researchers have explored is whether there's an optimal breathing rate, a specific number of breaths per minute that produces the strongest effects. What they found is that there isn't one single answer that works for everyone, but there is a general range that seems to be particularly powerful. Most adults naturally breathe somewhere between 12 and 20 times per minute when they're going about their normal activities. When you sleep, this naturally slows down to somewhere between 8 and 12 breaths per minute, sometimes even slower during the deepest stages of sleep. What researchers have found is that consciously slowing your breathing to somewhere between 4 and 6 breaths per minute, roughly 1 breath every 10 to 15 seconds, seems to create particularly strong effects on heart rate variability and vagal tone. This is slower than most people naturally breathe, but it's not so slow that it feels uncomfortable or forced. It's a gentle slowing, a stretching out of each cycle, and within this range there's flexibility. Some people find that 5 breaths per minute feels natural and easy. Others prefer 6 breaths per minute or even slightly slower. The specific rate that works best for you might depend on your lung capacity, on your height and body size, on whether you're lying down or sitting up, on how practiced you are at slow breathing. The invitation, if you're interested in exploring this, is to experiment gently, to try different rates and see what feels sustainable and comfortable, what allows you to breathe slowly without straining or feeling like you're not getting enough air. The goal isn't to set a record or to breathe as slowly as possible. The goal is simply to breathe more slowly than you normally do, to extend each breath, to make your exhales longer than your inhales, and to do this in a way that feels natural and easy, a way that you could sustain for 5 or 10 minutes without effort. If you're lying down now, as you might be if you're listening to this in bed hoping to fall asleep, you might notice your own breath, not to change it yet, but just to observe it, to feel where the movement is, whether it's mostly in your chest or deeper in your belly, whether your inhales and exhales are roughly the same length, or whether one is naturally longer. There's no right or wrong answer, no correct way to breathe in this moment. Your breathing right now is perfect for right now. But if you wanted to, if you felt curious about it, you could begin to gently extend your next exhale, just letting it take an extra second or two, not forcing it, not pushing all the air out with effort, but simply allowing the exhale to continue a bit longer than it might naturally continue. And then you could let the next inhale come when it wants to come, not rushing it, not gasping, just a natural, easy inhale that fills your lungs without strain. And then another long, slow exhale, perhaps even longer than the last one, letting it stretch out across 4 or 5 or 6 seconds, feeling how your body naturally releases tension as the air flows out. This is the basic pattern, this gentle cycle of an easy inhale followed by a long, slow exhale repeated over and over. And even doing this for just a few breaths, you might notice something shifting, some subtle softening in your body, some slight quieting in your mind. The effects of slow breathing build with time. The first few breaths might not feel dramatically different from your normal breathing, but as you continue, as you maintain this slower rhythm for a minute, for 5 minutes, for longer, the signals you're sending through your vagus nerve accumulate, the shift in your autonomic balance becomes more pronounced, and the sense of calm deepens. This is why slow breathing is often recommended as a practice to do before sleep, because it can help shift your nervous system into the state that's conducive to sleep, that state of parasympathetic dominance where your body is focused on rest and repair rather than on vigilance and action. You're essentially giving your brain permission to let go of the day, to stop scanning for threats or problems, to settle into the safety of this moment. And your brain, responding to the clear signals from your breath and your heart and the carbon dioxide in your blood, begins to accept this permission, begins to release its grip on wakefulness, begins to allow sleep to approach. But slow breathing doesn't just help with falling asleep. It can also affect the quality of sleep you have once you're asleep, particularly if you practice it regularly enough that it becomes somewhat automatic. Enough that your breathing tends to slow down more easily even when you're not consciously controlling it. Sleep itself involves cycles of different stages, from light sleep through deeper slow wave sleep and into REM sleep, with each stage having different characteristics and different functions. The deepest stages of sleep, particularly slow wave sleep, are associated with physical restoration, with the release of growth hormone, with the consolidation of certain types of memory, with the clearing of metabolic waste from the brain. People who have better parasympathetic tone, who have stronger vagal function, tend to spend more time in these deeper stages of sleep, tend to have more restorative sleep even if the total number of hours they sleep is the same. This is one reason why someone can sleep for 8 hours and wake up feeling exhausted, while someone else sleeps for 7 hours and wakes up feeling refreshed. It's not just about duration, it's about the quality and depth of the sleep, and this quality is influenced by many factors, one of which is the state of your autonomic nervous system. When we talk about slow breathing helping with sleep, then we're not just talking about helping you fall asleep initially, though that's certainly part of it. We're talking about creating conditions throughout your body and brain that support deeper, more restorative sleep, that allow your nervous system to fully shift into its rest and repair mode, rather than hovering in a semi-alert state where you're asleep, but not deeply asleep, where you're resting but not fully restoring. This is particularly important in our modern environment, where so many aspects of daily life tend to keep us in a more sympathetic, more activated state than our ancestors would have been in. The constant availability of information, the screens that emit blue light that suppresses melatonin production, the news cycle that presents an endless stream of things to worry about, the work that follows us home through our phones and laptops, the ambient noise and light pollution in urban environments, all of these things tend to keep our sympathetic nervous system more active than it would naturally be, making it harder to shift into the parasympathetic state that sleep requires. Slow breathing is one tool, one accessible and free and always available tool that can help counteract this chronic activation, that can help tip the balance back toward parasympathetic dominance, toward rest and calm. It's not a complete solution to all the challenges of modern life, of course. It doesn't eliminate stress or remove the actual problems you might be facing, but it does give you a way to regulate your own nervous system, to have some influence over your own state, even when you can't control your circumstances. This is valuable not just for sleep, but for managing stress in general, for maintaining emotional balance, for preserving your health over the long term. Chronic activation of the sympathetic nervous system, chronic stress, has been linked to numerous health problems, from cardiovascular disease to weakened immune function to accelerated aging. Anything that helps you shift more often and more easily into parasympathetic mode, that helps you spend more of your time in a state of relative calm and relaxation, is likely to have benefits that extend far beyond just sleeping better, though sleeping better alone would be worthwhile enough. The relationship between breathing and emotion has been recognized in various forms across many cultures and traditions for thousands of years. Yogic breathing practices, or pranayama, have been part of yoga for millennia, with specific breathing patterns used to create different mental states, some to energize and focus, others to calm and prepare for meditation. Buddhist meditation practices often involve attention to the breath as an anchor for awareness. Chinese medicine has long recognized the connection between breath and vital energy, or qi. These traditional systems didn't have access to modern neuroscience, didn't know about the vagus nerve or parasympathetic activation or carbon dioxide levels, but through careful observation and experimentation over generations, they discovered that changing how you breathe changes how you feel, and they developed sophisticated practices around this discovery. What modern science has done is to explain the mechanisms, to show how and why these practices work in terms of nerves and brain regions and biochemistry, validating what contemplative traditions discovered through direct experience. This convergence of ancient wisdom and modern science is actually quite beautiful, a reminder that human beings have always been capable of learning important things about themselves through careful attention and experimentation, even without sophisticated technology. The yogis who developed elaborate breathing practices thousands of years ago were doing a kind of empirical science, testing different approaches and noting their effects, refining their techniques over generations. They just described their findings in different language, using concepts like prana and chakras instead of neurons and neurotransmitters. The underlying observations were accurate. Slow breathing does change your mental state. Certain patterns of breathing do promote calm, while others promote alertness. The breath is indeed a bridge between body and mind, between the voluntary and involuntary, between your conscious intentions and your autonomic responses. Modern science hasn't discovered something entirely new. It's more that it has provided a new vocabulary and a new level of detail for describing something humans have known for a very long time. Still, the scientific research has added value, partly by increasing confidence in these practices among people who might be skeptical of traditional or spiritual approaches, and partly by refining our understanding of what works best and why. For instance, the research on respiratory sinus arrhythmia and heart rate variability has helped clarify why the exhale is particularly important, why making your exhale longer than your inhale is such an effective way to activate parasympathetic responses. Traditional practices often emphasize the exhale, but the reason was described in terms of releasing stale energy or letting go of tension, which is accurate in a phenomenological sense but doesn't explain the mechanism. Now we know that the mechanism involves vagal activation triggered by the prolonged stimulation of stretch receptors in the lungs and the resulting changes in heart rate. This knowledge doesn't make the practice more effective, but it does make it more understandable, more accessible to people who want to understand what they're doing and why. Similarly, research on breathing and anxiety has helped clarify that it's not just about breathing slowly in general, but about avoiding the rapid, shallow, upper chest breathing that can trigger or worsen anxiety. This has led to clinical applications, to breathing-based treatments for panic disorder and generalized anxiety disorder, to breathing training as part of treatment for PTSD and depression. Therapists now often teach clients specific breathing techniques as part of cognitive behavioral therapy as a concrete skill that can be used in moments of high stress or panic. The breathing techniques being taught are often quite simple, usually some variation on the pattern we've been discussing. Breathe in slowly through your nose for a count of 4, hold briefly if comfortable, then breathe out slowly through your nose or mouth for a count of 6 or 8. This creates that pattern of a longer exhale, that activation of parasympathetic response, that shift away from the sympathetic arousal of anxiety. Done regularly, practiced repeatedly, this simple pattern can significantly reduce baseline anxiety levels and make it easier to manage anxious moments when they arise. The practice doesn't have to be complicated or time-consuming. You don't need to sit in a special position or light candles or create any particular atmosphere. You can do it in bed with the lights off, which is perhaps the ideal context if your goal is to fall asleep. You can do it sitting in a chair during a break at work. You can do it standing in line at the grocery store. You can do it anywhere, anytime, because your breath is always with you, always available as a tool for self-regulation. This accessibility is part of what makes breath work so valuable. Unlike many interventions that require equipment or particular settings or other people, breathing is something you have complete control over, something that's always within reach. You carry this powerful tool for influencing your nervous system with you wherever you go, functioning automatically when you don't need to think about it, available for conscious control whenever you want to use it intentionally. If you're lying down now, listening to these words in the dark or near dark, perhaps already feeling drowsy, you might notice that your breathing has already begun to slow without you having done anything deliberate about it. This is natural. The act of lying down, of relaxing your muscles, of letting your attention drift through ideas that don't require sharp focus or active thinking, tends to slow your breathing on its own. Your body is already beginning to prepare for sleep, already starting to shift into that parasympathetic state, and your breathing is reflecting this shift, becoming deeper and slower and more regular. You might also notice, if you're paying attention, that as you get drowsier, as you approach sleep, your breathing changes in character, becoming not just slower but also more effortless, more automatic, as if it's happening by itself without any need for you to be involved. This is exactly what's supposed to happen. As you move from wakefulness into sleep, conscious control of breathing fades away and your brainstem takes over completely, maintaining the rhythm of respiration without any input from your conscious mind. This transition, this letting go of conscious control, is part of what makes falling asleep possible. Sleep requires a release of voluntary control, a surrender to automatic processes, and your breathing is one of the first things to make this transition. You can't fall asleep while you're actively trying to control every aspect of what your body is doing. You have to let go, have to trust your brainstem and your autonomic nervous system to keep things running, and they're perfectly capable of doing so. They've been doing it every night of your life, maintaining your breathing and your heartbeat and your blood pressure and all the other essential functions while you were completely unconscious and unaware. Learning to breathe slowly, learning to influence your autonomic nervous system through conscious control of breath, isn't about taking over these functions permanently. It's about temporarily adjusting them, about giving them a gentle push in the direction of calm and rest, and then getting out of the way, letting them continue on their own, letting sleep arrive without interference. The image that sometimes comes to mind is of a sailboat. When you're breathing slowly and deliberately, you're adjusting the sails, catching the wind in a particular way, steering the boat toward a particular destination. But you can't sail and sleep at the same time. At some point, you have to trust that the boat will continue moving in roughly the right direction, even if you're not actively steering every moment, that the wind and the current and the fundamental design of the boat will keep things going while you rest. Your body's like this. You can steer it towards sleep through slow breathing, through relaxing your muscles, through letting your thoughts become looser and less directed. But then you have to let go of the steering, let go of the effort, and trust that sleep will arrive on its own when the conditions are right. The slow breathing creates the conditions. The letting go allows sleep to actually happen. There's a paradox in trying to fall asleep, a paradox that many people who struggle with insomnia know intimately. The harder you try to fall asleep, the more effort you put into it, the more awake you become. This is because trying, effort, intention, these are all activities of your conscious mind, your prefrontal cortex, your executive function, and these are precisely the systems that need to quiet down for sleep to occur. Sleep is not something you do. It's something that happens to you when you stop doing, when you stop trying, when you allow consciousness to slip away. So anything that reduces effort, that makes the transition towards sleep feel more like a natural drift than like an achievement you're working toward, is helpful. Slow breathing helps partly because it activates parasympathetic responses, but also because it gives your mind something to focus on that isn't the goal of falling asleep. Something gentle and repetitive and present moment focus that can occupy your attention just enough to prevent your mind from spinning off into worries or plans or the meta worry of, why can't I fall asleep? This is why breathwork is often combined with what's called body scanning, where you slowly move your attention through different parts of your body, noticing sensations without judging them or trying to change them. The combination of slow breathing and body scanning is particularly effective because it keeps your attention occupied with present moment sensory experience, with interoception, which, as we discussed earlier, activates the task-positive network in your brain and quiets the default mode network, reducing rumination and mind wandering. Your attention moves from your breath to the sensations in your feet, maybe noticing the temperature or any pressure or contact with the sheets. And as you notice these sensations, your muscles naturally release tension that you might not have even realized was there. Then your attention moves up to your calves, your knees, your thighs, each time pairing the noticing with a slow, complete exhale, as if you're breathing out tension, breathing out holding, breathing out the day. This combination practice, slow breathing plus body scanning, has been researched extensively and has been found to be effective for both falling asleep initially and for falling back asleep after nighttime awakenings. The reason it works so well is that it addresses multiple factors that can interfere with sleep. It activates parasympathetic responses through the breathing pattern. It releases physical tension through the body awareness. It occupies attention in a way that prevents rumination. And it creates a kind of ritual, a repeated pattern that your mind and body can learn to associate with sleep, so that over time, just beginning the practice becomes a signal that sleep is coming, which itself helps sleep arrive more easily. This is classical conditioning. The same process Pavlov demonstrated with dogs and bells, but applied to your own nervous system, training your brain to respond to the cue of slow breathing and body awareness with a response of drowsiness and eventually sleep. The training aspect is worth emphasizing. The first time you try slow breathing as a way to help yourself fall asleep, it might help a little, or it might help a lot, or you might not notice much difference at all. This doesn't mean it's not working. It means your nervous system is learning a new pattern, getting familiar with a new approach, and like any learning, it takes repetition. The more regularly you practice slow breathing, particularly if you practice it specifically as part of your bedtime routine, the stronger the associations become, the more automatic the responses become, and the more effective the practice becomes. After weeks or months of regular practice, you might find that just taking a few slow breaths is enough to make you feel noticeably drowsier, that your body has learned to respond quickly to this signal, that the pathway between slow breathing and parasympathetic activation has been strengthened through repeated use. This is neuroplasticity in action, your brain and nervous system adapting to repeated patterns of activity, becoming more efficient at producing the responses that are frequently requested. Every time you practice slow breathing, you're not just creating a temporary state of calm, you're also slightly strengthening the neural pathways involved in that calm, making it a little easier to activate those pathways in the future. Over time, this can lead to lasting changes in your baseline nervous system functioning, to a general shift toward greater parasympathetic tone, toward a nervous system that's more balanced, more resilient, more capable of returning to calm after stress. This is why practices like meditation and yoga and Tai Chi, which all involve elements of slow breathing and present moment awareness, seem to have cumulative benefits that build over time, benefits that extend beyond the immediate period of practice into your general daily functioning and your ability to handle whatever challenges arise. The breath, in this sense, becomes more than just a mechanical process of gas exchange, more than just oxygen in and carbon dioxide out. It becomes a language, a way your body and brain communicate with each other about safety and danger, about rest and action, about where you are and what this moment requires. And because it's a language you can speak consciously, because you can choose to breathe slowly even when your automatic pattern might be quick and shallow, you have the ability to participate in this conversation, to influence what your brain believes about your current situation. When your thoughts are spinning with worry but your breath is slow and steady, there's a kind of contradiction, and your brain tends to resolve this contradiction by trusting the body, by believing the breath, by concluding that perhaps things are more okay than the worried thoughts suggest. This is backwards from how we usually think about the relationship between mind and body, where we assume our thoughts control our physical state, but the reality is more bidirectional, more of a two-way conversation, where the body's signals can shape the mind's interpretations just as much as the mind's interpretations shape the body's responses. This bidirectional relationship is part of what's called embodied cognition, the idea that our thinking and feeling aren't separate from our physical bodies, but are deeply integrated with them, shaped by them, inseparable from them. Your emotional state isn't just something happening in your brain, some pure mental phenomenon. It's distributed throughout your body, reflected in your posture, your muscle tension, your breathing rate, your heart rate, your gut sensations. When you feel anxious, you don't just think anxious thoughts. Your whole body organizes itself into a pattern that is anxiety, a pattern that includes shallow breathing and a racing heart and tense shoulders and a tight stomach. Similarly, when you feel calm, your whole body reflects this calmness, organizing itself into a different pattern, one that includes slow breathing and a steady heart rate and relaxed muscles and easy digestion. What slow breathing does is allow you to initiate the physical pattern of calm deliberately. And once that pattern starts to establish itself in your body, your emotional state tends to follow, tends to shift toward calmness, because that's what matches the physical pattern your body is expressing. This might sound almost magical, the idea that simply changing your breathing pattern could change how you feel emotionally, but it's not magic at all. It's biology, neuroscience, the way your nervous system is designed to function. Your brain is constantly integrating information from multiple sources, from your thoughts and memories and beliefs, from your sensory environment, and from the internal state of your body, and it weighs all these sources together to arrive at its best guess about what's happening and how you should feel and what you should do. The signals from your body, including your breathing, carry a lot of weight in this integration because they're immediate, concrete, difficult to misinterpret. Your brain can sometimes confuse or misread cognitive signals, can spiral into catastrophic thinking, or get stuck on irrational fears, but the signals from your vagus nerve about your heart rate and breathing are clear and direct. When those signals consistently say everything is calm, no emergency, your brain eventually has to take that into account, has to adjust its assessment of the situation to match what the body is reporting. There's research showing that people's emotional interpretations of ambiguous situations can be influenced by their breathing. When people are breathing quickly, they're more likely to interpret neutral faces as threatening or ambiguous scenarios as dangerous. When they're breathing slowly, they're more likely to give neutral interpretations, or even positive ones. This shows that breathing isn't just responding to your emotional state, it's actively shaping it, providing context that influences how you perceive and interpret everything around you. If you're interested in feeling calmer, in seeing the world as less threatening, in approaching situations with more equanimity and less reactivity, then training yourself to breathe more slowly more often is one of the most direct routes to that goal. It's not about positive thinking or trying to convince yourself that problems don't exist. It's about changing the physiological context in which your thinking occurs, creating a bodily state that supports calmer, clearer, more balanced thinking. The practice of slow breathing then can be understood at multiple levels simultaneously. At the most basic level, it's a technique for activating your parasympathetic nervous system and promoting relaxation. At another level, it's a form of attention training, a way to practice focusing on present moment sensory experience rather than getting lost in thought. At yet another level, it's a method for emotional regulation, a way to influence your emotional state through your body rather than through trying to control your thoughts directly. And at perhaps the deepest level, it's a practice of trust, of learning to trust your body's wisdom, to trust that your nervous system knows how to rest and restore itself if you create the right conditions and then get out of the way. All of these levels are happening at once, interpenetrating and supporting each other, which is part of why such a simple practice can have such wide-ranging effects. The breath is also, in a very literal sense, your connection to the world beyond your skin. Every breath brings in air that was just outside your body, air that's been part of the atmosphere, part of the great ocean of gases that surrounds this planet. The oxygen molecules you're breathing in right now have traveled, have been cycled through countless other living things, have been part of trees and grasses and plankton, have been exhaled by other humans and animals, have drifted across continents and oceans. When you breathe in, you're taking in this shared air, this commons that belongs to everyone and everything that breathes. When you breathe out, you're adding your own breath to this shared atmosphere, releasing carbon dioxide that plants will use for photosynthesis, participating in the vast ancient cycles of gas exchange that make life on this planet possible. This isn't mysticism, it's just the reality of atmospheric chemistry, the reality of living on a planet where the air is constantly being circulated and renewed, where your in-breath is inevitably connected to countless other creatures' out-breaths, and vice versa. Thinking about breathing this way, as a form of participation in something larger than yourself, can add another dimension to the practice of slow breathing. You're not just calming your own nervous system, you're also acknowledging your connection to the living world, your dependence on the atmosphere and on the photosynthetic organisms that maintain it, your place in these ancient cycles. This broader perspective can itself be calming, a reminder that you're part of something vast and ongoing, that your individual worries and struggles, real as they are also just small moments in a much larger pattern of existence. This isn't meant to diminish your concerns or suggest they don't matter, but rather to provide context, to remind you that there's a bigger picture in which you exist, and that sometimes stepping back to see that bigger picture, even just for a moment, can provide relief from the intensity of your immediate experience. The rhythm of breathing is also your most basic rhythm, the first rhythm you ever experienced, the rhythm that began when you were born and will continue until you die. Before you had language, before you had clear memories, before you had a sense of yourself as a separate individual, you had this rhythm, this in and out, this constant exchange with the world. In some ways, becoming aware of your breath, paying attention to it, is a form of return to something fundamental, something that's been with you all along but that you usually ignore because it works automatically. When you choose to notice your breath, to feel it, to perhaps slow it down or change its pattern, you're touching something very old in yourself, something pre-verbal and primal, and this can create a sense of groundedness, of coming back to basics, of remembering something essential that you'd temporarily forgotten in the complexity and abstraction of adult life. Children naturally breathe more with their bellies than adults do, using their diaphragms fully, allowing their abdomens to expand with each inhale. Somewhere in the process of growing up, many people shift to more chest-based breathing, shallower and less efficient, partly due to stress and tension, partly due to cultural messages about holding your stomach in, partly just from spending more time sitting hunched over desks and screens. This shift towards shallow breathing isn't inevitable, and it can be reversed through practice and awareness. Learning to breathe deeply again, to let your belly expand with each inhale, to use your full lung capacity rather than just the upper portion of your lungs, is in a sense reclaiming something you knew how to do as a child, returning to a more natural and efficient pattern. When people first try diaphragmatic breathing, belly breathing, they sometimes feel awkward or self-conscious, but with practice it becomes natural again, becomes the default, and chest breathing becomes the exception rather than the rule. The diaphragm itself is a remarkable muscle, a dome-shaped sheet of muscle and tendon that separates your chest cavity from your abdominal cavity. And that contracts downward when you inhale, creating negative pressure in your chest that draws air into your lungs. When your diaphragm contracts fully, moving down significantly, it allows your lungs to expand more completely, allows you to take in more air with less effort. And it also creates a gentle massage effect on the organs below it, on your liver and stomach and intestines, promoting healthy circulation and digestion. When you breathe shallowly, using mostly the muscles between your ribs and in your upper chest, your diaphragm barely moves, and you lose all these benefits. You have to work harder to move less air, and you miss out on the calming signals that come from deep, diaphragmatic breathing. This is why learning to breathe with your belly, to let your diaphragm do most of the work, is such an important part of many breathing practices. It's not just about breathing slowly, it's also about breathing deeply, fully, efficiently, in the way your respiratory system was designed to work. If you wanted to feel whether you're breathing with your diaphragm or with your chest, you could place one hand on your chest and one hand on your belly, just below your rib cage, and notice which hand moves more when you breathe. If the hand on your chest is doing most of the moving, and the hand on your belly is relatively still, you're breathing primarily with your chest, using accessory muscles rather than your diaphragm. If the hand on your belly is doing most of the moving, rising with each inhale and falling with each exhale, while the hand on your chest moves relatively little, you're breathing diaphragmatically, using the muscle that's designed for this purpose. Most people find that when they're stressed or anxious, chest breathing predominates, and when they're relaxed or sleeping, belly breathing takes over. By consciously choosing to breathe with your belly, you're once again sending that signal to your nervous system, that message that says everything is okay, that there's no need for the shallow, rapid, chest-based breathing of stress or danger. The act of breathing slowly and deeply, using your diaphragm, engaging your full lung capacity, can also be understood as a form of self-care, a way of tending to your own nervous system the way you might tend to a garden, providing the right conditions for health and growth. So much of modern life involves adapting to external demands, meeting other people's expectations, responding to stimuli that come at you from every direction. Slow breathing is a time when you turn your attention inward, when you prioritize your own regulation over external demands, when you give yourself permission to just be, to just breathe, without needing to accomplish anything or respond to anything or be anything other than a breathing body in this moment. This might seem like a small thing, almost trivial, but in a life that's often rushed and demanding, these moments of turning inward, of self-tending, of simply being with your own breath, can be profoundly restorative, can provide an island of calm in a sea of activity. There's also something to be said for the simplicity of breath as an object of attention. Unlike many forms of meditation or relaxation practice that involve visualizations or mantras or complex instructions, breathing requires nothing external, no special knowledge or belief system, no particular cultural or religious context. It's universal, common to all humans regardless of background or belief. This universality makes it accessible, makes it something that anyone can practice regardless of their situation or their history. You don't need to believe anything in particular to benefit from slow breathing. You don't need to adopt any particular worldview or philosophy. You just need to be willing to pay attention to something you're already doing, to notice it and perhaps adjust it slightly, and to observe what happens when you do. This empirical approach, this invitation to simply try something and notice the results, is part of what makes breath work so widely applicable and so consistently effective across different populations and contexts. The scientific study of breathing and its effects on the nervous system is still ongoing, still revealing new details and mechanisms. Researchers continue to discover connections between breathing patterns and brain function, between breath and emotion, between respiratory rate and cognitive performance. There's emerging research, for instance, on how breathing affects memory consolidation, with some studies suggesting that the phase of breathing when information is encoded can influence how well that information is remembered. There's research on how breathing influences pain perception, with slow breathing shown to increase pain tolerance and reduce the subjective experience of pain. There's work being done on breathing and immune function, on how respiratory patterns might influence inflammation and immune responses. Each of these lines of research adds another piece to the puzzle, another way of understanding how this simple automatic process connects to so many aspects of health and functioning. What all this research points to is a picture of breathing as a master regulator, a process that sits at the intersection of multiple systems, influencing and being influenced by your cardiovascular system, your nervous system, your endocrine system, your immune system, your brain. Because breathing connects to so many systems, because it's so fundamentally integrated into your overall functioning, small changes in breathing pattern can ripple outward, can influence all these connected systems, can shift your entire organism toward either stress or relaxation, towards sympathetic or parasympathetic dominance. This is why breathing is sometimes called a portal or a gateway, not in any mystical sense, but simply because it provides access, a way to influence systems that are normally automatic and unconscious, a point of entry for conscious regulation of autonomic processes. You can't directly control your heart rate through conscious intention, can't directly dial up or down your vagal tone, can't consciously adjust your blood pressure or your stress hormone levels, but you can control your breathing, and through your breathing you can influence all these other systems indirectly. This indirect influence is powerful precisely because it works with your body's natural regulatory mechanisms rather than trying to override them or force them. When you breathe slowly, you're not fighting against your physiology, you're cooperating with it, activating pathways that are already there, using your body's own built-in systems for creating calm. This is different from, say, taking medication to reduce anxiety, which works by introducing external chemicals that bind to receptors and alter neural signaling. Medication has its place and can be essential for many people, but it's fundamentally external, something imposed on your system from outside. Breathing, by contrast, is internal, is you working with your own natural capacities, strengthening and refining systems that you already possess. Both approaches can be valuable, and they're not mutually exclusive. Many people benefit from combining medication with breathing practices and other forms of self-regulation. But there's something empowering about discovering that you have this internal capacity, this tool that's always available, this way to influence your own state that doesn't depend on anything external. The sense of agency this provides, the sense that you have some control over your own nervous system, some ability to steer yourself toward calm when you need to, can itself reduce anxiety. A lot of anxiety comes from feeling helpless, from feeling at the mercy of your own reactions, from the fear that your anxiety will spiral out of control and you'll be unable to stop it. Learning that you can influence your state through breathing, that you have a reliable method for activating your parasympathetic nervous system, provides a counterweight to this helplessness. You might still experience anxiety, still have moments of stress or panic, but you also know that you have a tool you can use, a practice you can turn to, something concrete you can do rather than just suffering passively. This knowledge changes your relationship to your own experience, makes you more of an active participant and less of a victim of your own nervous system's fluctuations. Over time, with regular practice, this sense of agency can grow, can extend beyond just breathing into a more general confidence in your ability to regulate yourself, to cope with difficult emotions, to navigate challenging situations. This is one of the broader benefits of contemplative practices in general, of meditation and mindfulness and body awareness practices that all involve, in different ways, learning to work with your own mind and body rather than being entirely at their mercy. Breathing practices are often a good entry point into this broader world of contemplative practice because they're concrete, measurable, relatively easy to learn, and have effects that are noticeable fairly quickly. Someone who starts with breathing might eventually become curious about other practices, might explore different forms of meditation or movement practices like yoga or Tai Chi, might develop a broader toolkit for self-regulation and self-awareness. But even if breathing remains the only practice someone does, even if they never explore anything else, the benefits can be substantial and lasting. The practice doesn't require perfection, doesn't require doing it exactly right every time. Some days your breath will slow easily, will feel smooth and natural and calming. Other days it might feel awkward or forced or like you can't quite get enough air. This variation is normal, is part of the natural fluctuation in how your body feels from day to day, influenced by how well you slept, what you ate, what you did during the day, what you're thinking about, how much stress you're under. The invitation is to practice without attachment to outcomes, to simply do the practice and notice what happens without needing it to feel a certain way or produce a certain result every time. Some breaths will be perfect, some will be messy. All of them are contributing to the gradual strengthening of the pathways involved, to the slow process of training your nervous system to more easily access states of calm. This attitude of gentle persistence without perfectionism is itself worth cultivating. So much in our achievement-oriented culture pushes toward always improving, always optimizing, always measuring progress and trying to do better. This approach has its place, but it can also create stress and self-judgment, can turn even relaxation practices into another thing you have to be good at, another arena for performance and evaluation. Breathing is an opportunity to practice a different approach, to simply show up, to do the practice without needing to grade yourself, to let it be enough that you're doing it at all, that you're taking these moments to turn toward yourself with attention and care. The benefits will accumulate on their own, without you needing to force them or track them obsessively. Your nervous system will learn and adapt through repeated experience, through neuroplasticity, through the simple fact of regular practice over time. Your job is just to keep practicing, to keep returning to your breath, to keep creating these moments of slowness and awareness in the midst of whatever else is happening in your life. In the context of sleep specifically, breathing practices can be woven into your bedtime routine as a signal, a marker that the day is ending and sleep is approaching. Many people find it helpful to have a consistent routine before bed, a series of actions that always happen in the same order, that become associated with sleep through repetition. This routine might include things like dimming the lights, brushing your teeth, perhaps reading for a few minutes, and then, once you're in bed with the lights off, 5 or 10 minutes of slow breathing, perhaps combined with body scanning, perhaps just breathing on its own. This consistent routine helps train your brain to recognize the sequence, to anticipate sleep, to begin the process of letting go even before you're fully lying down. The breathing practice becomes part of this sequence, becomes one of the cues that tells your nervous system that sleep is coming, that it's safe to relax, that the vigilance of the day can be released. If you wake during the night, which is normal and happens to most people at least occasionally, breathing practices can also help you fall back asleep. The key is not to panic, not to immediately start worrying about the fact that you're awake, not to look at the clock and calculate how many hours of sleep you're losing. Instead, you can simply notice that you're awake, accept it without drama, and then begin breathing slowly, perhaps counting breaths, perhaps scanning through your body, perhaps just feeling the sensation of breathing without any additional structure. Often, if you can avoid creating stress around the waking, If you can just relax into the darkness and breathe slowly, sleep will return on its own within a few minutes, or perhaps 10 or 15 minutes. The breathing keeps your nervous system calm, prevents the cascade of stress hormones that can come from lying awake worrying about not sleeping, and creates the conditions for sleep to return naturally. There's a common piece of advice about sleep that says if you're awake for more than 20 minutes or so, you should get out of bed and do something quiet in another room until you feel sleepy again. This advice is meant to prevent your brain from associating your bed with wakefulness and frustration. It's good advice in some situations, particularly for people with chronic insomnia who have developed strong negative associations with their bed. But for occasional nighttime wakings, for the normal brief arousals that happen between sleep cycles, getting out of bed might actually be more disruptive than just staying in bed and breathing slowly. The act of getting up, turning on lights, moving to another room, all of this tends to increase arousal, to wake you up more fully, making it harder to fall back asleep rather than easier. Lying quietly in bed, breathing slowly, keeping your eyes closed, maintaining a state of rest even if you're not fully asleep, is often the better approach for these brief wakings. You're still resting your body even if your mind is slightly alert, and by staying relaxed and breathing slowly, you're making it as easy as possible for sleep to return. The boundary between waking and sleeping is not as sharp as we sometimes imagine. Sleep doesn't arrive all at once like a switch being flipped. It comes gradually in stages, with consciousness fading in and out, thoughts becoming dreamlike and illogical, awareness of your surroundings dimming. You might drift into a light stage of sleep without quite realizing it, then drift back to a state that feels awake, then drift back towards sleep again. This liminal zone, this border region between waking and sleeping, is actually a kind of rest in itself. A state where your body is relaxed and your mind is disengaging from active thought even if you're not technically asleep yet. Breathing slowly helps you settle into this liminal space, helps you become comfortable with this in-between state rather than fighting it or becoming frustrated by it. By accepting this gradual transition, by not demanding that sleep arrive immediately and completely, you paradoxically make it easier for sleep to actually arrive. There's a certain art to this acceptance, to this allowing rather than striving. It connects to a broader principle that applies to many aspects of life. The principle that sometimes the way to get what you want is to stop trying so hard to get it, to relax your grip, to trust the process rather than trying to force an outcome. Sleep is one of the clearest examples of this principle. The more desperately you want to fall asleep, the more you try to make it happen, the more elusive it becomes. But when you let go of the goal, when you stop caring so much whether you sleep or not, when you tell yourself that resting quietly with slow breathing is good enough even if sleep never comes, that's often when sleep finally arrives, slipping in while you weren't paying attention, catching you by surprise in a moment when you'd stopped trying. This is frustrating from one perspective, because it means you can't achieve sleep through effort, can't earn it or work toward it in the usual ways. But it's also liberating, because it means all you have to do is create the right conditions and then let go. And if you can do that, if you can breathe slowly and relax your body and release your attachment to the outcome, then sleep will take care of itself. The practice of slow breathing, then, is not just a technique but also a kind of practice in letting go, in surrendering control, in trusting your body to do what it knows how to do. Every exhale is a small letting go, a release of air, and with it a release of tension, of holding, of effort. Every slow breath is practice in allowing rather than forcing, in cooperating with your natural rhythms rather than trying to override them. This practice in letting go, repeated breath after breath, night after night, gradually becomes easier, becomes more natural, until eventually it's not even practice anymore, but just the way you are, the way you meet the end of each day, with slowness and release and trust that sleep will come when your body is ready. And even if some nights sleep comes easily and other nights it takes longer, even if your sleep is sometimes deep and sometimes light, you know that you have this practice, this reliable way of creating calm in your nervous system, this breath that's always with you, always available, always ready to help you find your way back to rest. The breath, in the end, is both ordinary and extraordinary. Both something so simple and automatic that you can go hours without thinking about it, and also something powerful enough to shift your entire nervous system, to change your emotional state, to bridge the gap between waking and sleeping. It's been with you every moment of your life, this constant rhythm, this in and out, this exchange with the world, and it will be with you until the very last moment, until that final exhale that marks the end of everything. In between these two endpoints, the first breath and the last breath, there are millions of breaths, billions of breaths, most of them unconscious and automatic, but some of them, some precious few of them, brought into consciousness, noticed, felt, perhaps deliberately slowed, used as a tool for peace or presence or passage into sleep. These conscious breaths are a gift you give yourself, moments carved out from the flow of time, small spaces of awareness and intention in a life that can often feel like it's rushing past too quickly. There's no need to become precious about it, no need to turn breathing into something complicated or mystical or requiring special knowledge. It's just breathing, just air moving in and out, just your diaphragm contracting and relaxing, just oxygen and carbon dioxide being exchanged, just your heart rate slowing slightly with each exhale. But within this simple process, repeated over and over, there's a kind of quiet miracle. The miracle of a body that knows how to regulate itself, that has systems within systems designed to maintain balance, to adapt to changing conditions, to heal and restore given the right conditions. Slow breathing is one way you can provide those conditions, one way you can support your body's natural tendency toward homeostasis, toward balance, toward health. It costs nothing. It requires nothing except a few moments of your time and your willingness to turn your attention inward, to notice what's already happening, to perhaps adjust it slightly in the direction of slowness and depth. As you lie here now, in the darkness or near darkness, perhaps you're aware of your own breath. Perhaps you've already begun to breathe more slowly without deliberately deciding to, just from thinking about breath, from having your attention drawn to it. This is natural. Attention itself changes what you're attending to, and when you bring attention to your breath, it almost always begins to slow down, to deepen, to become more regular, even without any conscious intention to change it. You might notice the cool air coming in through your nose, if you're breathing through your nose, and the slightly warmer air flowing out. You might notice the gentle rise and fall of your chest or belly, the subtle movement that's always there, that's been there since birth, that will be there until the end. You might notice the pause between breaths, that moment of stillness between the exhale and the next inhale, a moment that can stretch longer than you might expect, a moment of pure quiet between the movements. In this moment, lying here, breathing slowly if you choose to, there's nowhere else you need to be, nothing else you need to do. The day is done, whatever happened in it, and tomorrow hasn't started yet, whatever it might bring. This is the space between, the nighttime space, the space for rest, and for the slow processes of restoration that happen when you stop trying, when you stop doing, when you simply let your body be. Your breath is carrying you gently towards sleep, each exhale releasing a little more of the day, each inhale bringing in fresh possibility for rest. There's no hurry, no deadline, no need to rush toward unconsciousness. You can linger here in this twilight space, this in-between, breathing slowly, feeling your body sink deeper into whatever surface holds you, feeling the weight of your limbs, the warmth or coolness of the air on your skin, the softness of darkness around you, the science we've been thinking about, the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic system and the carbon dioxide levels and the heart rate variability. All of this is happening right now in your body. These processes unfolding moment by moment, responding to your breath, creating the conditions for sleep. But you don't need to think about the science, don't need to hold any of it in your mind. It's enough to simply breathe, to let each breath be slow and full and easy, to let your exhale stretch out across many seconds, carrying tension away with them, making space for peace to settle in. Your body knows what to do with these signals. Your nervous system knows how to respond to slow breathing, how to shift toward rest, how to prepare for sleep. All that's required from you is the breathing itself, the simple act of allowing air to flow in and out at a gentle pace, and then letting go even of that, letting your breath become automatic again, letting consciousness fade, letting sleep approach in its own time. And if sleep doesn't come immediately, if you find yourself still aware, still thinking, still conscious of lying here in the dark, that's fine too. That's not a problem. That's just where you are in this moment. You can breathe slowly a while longer, can let your attention drift from your breath to the sensations in your body, can notice without judgment whatever you're experiencing, can rest in the simple fact of being alive, being here, being a breathing body in this moment. There's no failure in being awake, no wrongness in consciousness that continues when you'd prefer it would stop. There's just this moment, and then the next moment, and then the next, each one an opportunity to breathe, to notice, to relax a little more, to release a little more, to soften into the darkness and the quiet. The words are fading now, becoming fewer, leaving more space between them, more silence, more room for your own experience to be whatever it is without narration or guidance or structure. The breath continues, in and out. Slower now, perhaps, or perhaps not, it doesn't matter. Your breath is your breath, perfect as it is, doing exactly what it needs to do in this moment. The night stretches out ahead, hours of darkness, hours for rest, hours for your body to do its quiet work of restoration and healing and consolidation, hours for dreams to come and go like waves on a shore, hours for consciousness to dissolve into sleep and sleep to deepen into its various stages, cycling through the night in patterns that are ancient and automatic and beyond your control. All of this will happen on its own, without your help, without your effort, without you needing to do anything at all except stop doing, stop trying, stop holding on, stop being awake. So perhaps now, if you're ready, if your body feels ready, you can let these words fade completely into the background and let them become just sounds, just vibrations in the air, not carrying meaning anymore, just gentle noise that blends with the other sounds of night. The hum of appliances or the silence of stillness, the rhythm of your breath or the beating of your heart, all of it becoming one texture, one seamless experience of being here, being now, being on the edge of sleep or perhaps already slipping into it without quite noticing, consciousness fading like light fading at dusk, gradually, naturally, gently, until there's nothing left but darkness and breath and the slow, quiet miracle of a body at rest, letting go, falling away into sleep.